conference room at Sterling Manufacturing headquarters smelled like expensive coffee and older money. 23 family members sat around the massive oak table, all shareholders in the company my grandfather had built 50 years ago. All of them dressed in business attire that cost more than most people's monthly rent. All of them looking at me like I was a child who'd wandered into the wrong room. I was used to it. "Let's begin," Uncle Charles announced, tapping his pen against his leather portfolio. As the current CEO and my grandfather's eldest son, he ran these quarterly shareholder meetings with the enthusiasm of a man attending his own funeral. Q3 results are strong. Revenue up 12%, margins holding steady at 18%. Murmurs of approval circled the table. Aunt Patricia smiled. Cousin David nodded sagely as if he understood what any of those numbers actually meant. He'd inherited his shares, same as most people in this room. He'd never worked a day at Sterling Manufacturing in his life. Neither had I, technically. But that was about to become irrelevant. However, Uncle Charles continued, his face taking on that expression he used when delivering bad news he secretly enjoyed, "We have an opportunity. TechCore Industries has approached us about a partnership. They want to integrate our manufacturing capabilities with their distribution network." "How much investment are we talking?" Aunt Margaret asked, already pulling out her reading glasses to review the documents being passed around. "Initial capital requirement is $8 million, Uncle Charles said, "which we'll need to raise through either debt financing or additional shareholder contributions." The room erupted into discussion. Cousin Jennifer immediately started calculating her potential share. Uncle Robert was already shaking his head about debt ratios. Aunt Patricia wanted to know about returns. I raised my hand. Uncle Charles noticed me the way you might notice a mosquito, with mild irritation and the assumption it would go away on its own. "Yes, Sophie. I think we should decline the TechCore partnership," I said clearly. The room went silent. Then someone laughed. I think it was David. "I'm sorry." Uncle Charles's tone suggested I'd just proposed we manufacture products out of cheese. "The TechCore partnership," I repeated. "I think it's a bad investment. Their distribution network is overleveraged, they're facing regulatory challenges in 3 states, and their stock price has dropped 22% this quarter. Partnering with them right now would be like tying our anchor to a sinking ship." More silence. Then David laughed again, louder this time. "That's adorable," he said, not even trying to hide his condescension. "You've been reading business news. How cute." "Sophie," Aunt Margaret said in that voice adults use with precocious children, "this is a complex business decision. TechCore is a Fortune 500 company. They've been in operation for 30 years. 32 years, I corrected. And they're currently defending against 2 class action lawsuits and an SEC investigation. Their CEO resigned last month, and their CFO is selling personal shares at a rate that suggests he knows something the public doesn't." Uncle Charles set down his pen. "And where exactly are you getting this information?" "Reuters, Bloomberg, SEC filings, and TechCore's own quarterly reports," I said. "It's all public information. Public information that you apparently have time to read while doing whatever it is you do," Cousin Jennifer said with a smirk. She worked in marketing for a small firm and considered herself a business expert. "Some of us are busy running actual companies." "I own a software development company," I said mildly. "We do quite well." "Oh, that's right," David said, snapping his fingers in mock remembrance. "You make those app things. How many employees do you have again?" 5. 47 actually. As of last month." "Cute," David repeated like it was his favorite word. "But Sophie, this is big business. Sterling Manufacturing does $60 million a year in revenue. We're talking about partnerships that could double that. Your little software company is sweet, but it's not exactly relevant experience for this conversation." I took a sip of my water. The glass was Waterford crystal because of course it was. Everything in this building screamed old money, trying to prove it was still relevant. "I understand your concern," I said, keeping my voice level. "But I still think we should vote against the TechCore partnership." Uncle Charles actually rolled his eyes. "Sophie, with all due respect." "Which usually means no respect at all," I interjected. "You own less than 1% of this company," he continued, ignoring my comment. "Your grandfather left you 10,000 shares when he passed. That gives you 0.4% ownership and exactly zero say in major strategic decisions. Actually, Aunt Patricia added helpfully, I think it's 0.38% ownership. Not even 0.4. The room found this hilarious. Even Uncle Robert, who usually tried to be kind to me, was smiling. So while we appreciate your input, Uncle Charles said in a tone that made clear he absolutely did not appreciate my input, the adults in the room will make this decision. All in favor of moving forward with the TechCore partnership evaluation. 22 hands went up. Everyone except me. Motion passes, Uncle Charles declared. We'll begin due diligence immediately. Wait, I said. Sophie, the vote is over, Aunt Margaret said tiredly. I'd like to propose an alternative investment strategy, I continued. Instead of the TechCore partnership, we should focus on upgrading our existing manufacturing equipment, expanding into sustainable materials and diversifying our client base. I've prepared a presentation. I pulled out my laptop. David actually groaned. Oh my God, she made a PowerPoint. This is like watching a high school student present a career day project. Sophie, Uncle Charles said, his patience clearly exhausted, we don't have time for this. Some of us have real jobs to get back to. This will take 10 minutes, I said. We don't have 10 minutes to waste on. On what? I asked, meeting his eyes. On strategic planning? On alternative perspectives? On hearing from a shareholder? On listening to someone with 0.38% ownership lecture us about business strategy, Jennifer said. No offense, Sophie, but you inherited some shares from Grandpa. That doesn't make you qualified to run this company. Neither does inheriting 30,000 shares, I pointed out. But I don't see anyone questioning your participation. Jennifer's face flushed. I have an MBA. From an online program you completed while working part-time, I said. I'm not judging. Education is education. But if we're measuring qualifications, I have a degree in mechanical engineering from MIT and an MBA from Stanford. I graduated summa cum laude from both. That shut them up for approximately 5 seconds. Well, good for you, David said. But again, this is big business. Real money. Not whatever you're playing with in your app company. My software company generates $8 million in annual revenue, I said quietly. More silence. David blinked. 8 million. 8.3 million to be precise. We specialize in manufacturing optimization software. Our clients include 3 Fortune 500 companies and over 200 mid-sized manufacturers across North America. I paused. One of those clients is Sterling Manufacturing, actually. We've been providing your production monitoring system for 3 years. Uncle Charles frowned. We use OptimizeCore for production monitoring. That's our software, I said. We operate under several brand names. OptimizeCore is one of them. You could have heard a pin drop. You're telling me, Aunt Patricia said slowly, that we've been paying your company for 3 years? Approximately $180,000 annually, yes. Although you get a family discount. Most clients pay $250,000 for the same package. Uncle Robert was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Sophie, why didn't you tell us this? You never asked, I said simply. You assumed I was running some tiny operation out of my apartment. I didn't see any reason to correct that assumption. That's... Jennifer struggled for words. That's actually pretty impressive. Thank you, I said. But it's not why I want you to reconsider the TechCore partnership. Then why? Uncle Charles asked. His tone had changed slightly. Still skeptical, but at least he was listening now. Because I've done more than read their public filings, I said. I've analyzed their entire supply chain, their vendor relationships, their logistics networks, and their financial projections. They're cutting costs in ways that will hurt them long term. They're losing key personnel. They're facing union negotiations in 4 facilities. And their core technology is becoming obsolete. How could you possibly know all that? Aunt Margaret asked. Research. Due diligence. The same thing any investor should do before committing $8 million. I opened my laptop. I really do have a presentation. If you'll give me 10 minutes, I can show you exactly why this partnership is a mistake. Uncle Charles glanced around the table. A few people were checking their phones, but most were actually paying attention now. Fine, he said. 10 minutes. I pulled up my presentation on the screen at the front of the room. 43 slides. Financial models, risk assessments, market analysis, alternative strategies. I'd spent 3 months preparing it. 8 minutes and 30 seconds later, the room was silent again. But this time it was a different kind of silence. These numbers, Uncle Robert said quietly, if they're accurate. They're accurate, I said. Every source is cited in the appendix. You can verify them yourselves. This is actually quite thorough, Aunt Patricia admitted grudgingly. David was scrolling through his phone. Her analysis on their stock price is right. It has dropped 22%. And there are 2 lawsuits. How did we miss this? Because you didn't look, I said. Not meanly, just factually. Uncle Charles was staring at the final slide, which showed projected outcomes of the TechCore partnership versus my alternative strategy. The numbers weren't even close. Sophie, this is impressive. But we'd need significant capital to implement your alternative plan. The equipment upgrades alone would cost $5 million. $6.2 million, I corrected. But the ROI is 340% over 3 years versus 180% for the TechCore partnership, assuming their company remains stable. Which it won't. We don't have $6.2 million in liquid capital, Jennifer said. That's why we were looking at the partnership in the first place. They were going to provide initial funding. I know, I said. Which is why I'm prepared to make an investment. The room perked up. David actually leaned forward. How much are you thinking? Uncle Charles asked carefully. $10 million, I said. You could have heard a pin drop. I was getting good at creating these silences. I'm sorry, David said. Did you say $10 million? I did. You have $10 million? Jennifer's voice had gone up an octave. I have considerably more than that, I said. But $10 million is what I'm prepared to invest in Sterling Manufacturing. In exchange, I'd like to purchase additional shares and secure a seat on the board of directors. Uncle Charles had gone very still. Sophie, where exactly did you get $10 million? Pie company, I said. $8 million in annual revenue over 6 years with profit margins around 40%. I've been investing aggressively. Software, real estate, strategic acquisitions. Strategic acquisitions, Aunt Margaret repeated. Like what? I pulled out my phone and opened an app. Like shares in Sterling Manufacturing. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. What do you mean? Uncle Charles's voice was very quiet. I mean that over the past 6 years, I've been quietly purchasing shares from family members who wanted to sell. Usually when someone needed cash quickly or wanted to divest, or didn't see the company as a good investment anymore. Remember when Cousin Bradley sold his shares 5 years ago to buy that boat? I bought them. When Aunt Susan sold hers to fund her daughter's wedding 3 years ago. I bought those too. I could see understanding dawning on several faces. And with it fear. How many shares? Uncle Robert asked. I swiped through my app. As of this morning, I own 1,967,000 shares of Sterling Manufacturing. The silence this time wasn't just quiet. It was the kind of absolute silence that happens when a bomb goes off and everyone is too shocked to scream. That's impossible, Uncle Charles whispered. It's not, I said. The company has 2.5 million shares total. I own approximately 78.68% of them. David's face had gone white. You own? You're saying you own the majority of the company? Controlling majority, I confirmed. By quite a significant margin. But how? Jennifer stammered. How did we not know? Because I purchased them through various investment entities and shell corporations, I explained. Sterling Capital LLC, TechBridge Holdings, West Coast Manufacturing Investments. I have 17 different entities that hold shares. None of them have my name directly attached. That's... Aunt Patricia struggled for words. That's manipulative. It's strategic, I corrected. And perfectly legal. Every purchase was fair market value. Every transaction was properly documented. I didn't manipulate anything. I just didn't announce what I was doing. Uncle Charles had finally found his voice again. Do you have any idea what this means? Yes, I said. It means that despite what you said earlier, I'm not a shareholder with 0.38% ownership and zero say. I'm the majority shareholder with 78% ownership and controlling interest. Which means that vote you just held about the TechCore partnership. It doesn't matter. Because I can override it. The room erupted. Everyone started talking at once. Aunt Margaret was on her phone, presumably calling a lawyer. David looked like he might be sick. Jennifer kept saying, "This can't be real," over and over. Uncle Charles stood up, his face red. "You can't do this." "I already did it," I said calmly. "You manipulated us. You lied." "I never lied," I said. "You asked me how many shares Grandpa left me. 10,000. That was the truth. You never asked if I'd purchased more. You assumed I hadn't because you assumed I couldn't afford to. That's not my fault." "This is corporate espionage," Aunt Patricia declared. "It's really not," I said. "Every share was purchased through open market transactions or private sales where the seller knew exactly what they were selling. Nobody was deceived. You all just didn't pay attention." Uncle Robert was the first to calm down. He'd always been the smartest one in the family. "Sophie, what do you want?" "I want what I've wanted all along," I said. "To stop the TechCore partnership and implement a real growth strategy. To modernize our equipment. To expand into sustainable manufacturing. To turn Sterling Manufacturing into something Grandpa would actually be proud of." "By taking it over?" Uncle Charles's voice was bitter. "By saving it," I corrected. "Uncle Charles, you're a decent CEO, but you're cautious to a fault. You've been running the company the same way for 15 years. Revenue is flat. Margins are shrinking. We're slowly being left behind by competitors who are innovating while we're stagnating. Our revenue is up 12% this year," he protested. "Because of inflation and price increases, not actual growth," I said. "Unit volume is down 8%. Customer satisfaction is down. Employee retention is down. We're dying slowly, and you're celebrating because we're dying slower than last year." The truth of it hung in the air. Several people looked uncomfortable because they knew I was right. "So what now?" Jennifer asked. "You're the majority shareholder. You could fire all of us tomorrow." "I could," I agreed. "But I won't. Most of you aren't actively involved in running the company anyway. You're just shareholders collecting dividends. That doesn't change. What changes is the direction of the company and who's making the strategic decisions." "Meaning you," David said. "Meaning me," I confirmed. "And Uncle Charles, if he's willing to work with me instead of fighting me. And anyone else who wants to actually contribute instead of just showing up to quarterly meetings to complain." I pulled up another slide on my laptop. "Here's what I'm proposing. I invest $10 million immediately. We decline the TechCore partnership. We implement the modernization plan I've outlined. We expand into sustainable manufacturing, which is going to be huge in the next 5 years. We diversify our client base. And we aim for revenue of $100 million within 3 years." "That's a 67% increase," Aunt Margaret said faintly. 66.7%, I said. "Yes. It's ambitious. But it's achievable with the right strategy." "And what happens to us?" Uncle Charles asked quietly. I met his eyes. "That depends on you. If you want to stay on as CEO and work with me to execute this plan, I'd be happy to have you. You know the operations better than anyone. But you'd need to report to me as chairman of the board. Can your ego handle that?" He stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "I suppose it'll have to." "Good," I said. "Uncle Robert, I'd like you on the board as well. You're the only person in this room who actually worked on the factory floor before becoming a shareholder. We need that perspective." Uncle Robert looked stunned. "You want me on the board?" "I do. Aunt Patricia, your background is in finance. I'd like you as CFO. We need to restructure our financial operations." Aunt Patricia's mouth opened and closed. I retired 5 years ago." "Consider yourself unretired," I said. "If you're interested. I'm not forcing anyone. But I'm building a team, and I want people who actually care about the company, not just the dividends." I looked around the table. "As for everyone else, you remain shareholders. Your dividends will actually increase if we execute this plan properly. But the days of showing up to vote down any innovation and collect checks are over. If you want to be involved, be involved. If you just want to be passive investors, fine. But don't get in the way." David had recovered some of his composure. "And what if we don't like this arrangement? What if we vote to oppose you? You can vote however you want, I said. But I own 78% of the shares. You could get every single other shareholder to vote against me and I'd still control the company. That's how majority ownership works. This is insane, Jennifer muttered. This is business, I corrected. Big business, as David likes to say. I looked at him. You said I was playing with my little app company. That my software business wasn't relevant experience. Well, my little company generates more revenue than some of you make in dividends. And I used that money to buy controlling interest in this company while you were all too busy dismissing me to notice. I closed my laptop and stood up. I'm scheduling a proper board meeting for next week. Uncle Charles, Aunt Patricia, Uncle Robert. I'll expect you there. We'll formalize the investment, the strategic plan, and the new organizational structure. Everyone else will receive detailed information about what's changing and what stays the same. You can't just walk out, Aunt Margaret said. We have questions. Then email them to me, I said. My contact information is in the shareholder directory. The same directory where my company is listed as your software vendor. The same information that's been available to you for 3 years that none of you bothered to look at. I picked up my bag and headed for the door. Sophie, Uncle Charles called out. I turned. He looked older than he had an hour ago. Why didn't you just tell us? Why go through all this secrecy? Because I wanted to see if you'd ever take me seriously on my own merits, I said. If you'd ever listen to Sophie the person, not Sophie the young cousin with barely any shares. And you didn't. Even today, even after I showed you my analysis, you were ready to dismiss me until I proved I had the power to force you to listen. That's not fair, Jennifer protested. Isn't it? I asked. David called my business suggestions cute. You compared my presentation to a high school career day project. Uncle Charles literally said I had exactly zero say in strategic decisions. You didn't dismiss my ideas because they were bad. You dismissed them because you didn't think I mattered. Nobody had a response to that. Well, now I matter, I said. Now you have to listen. Not because I've convinced you I'm smart or capable or qualified. But because I own 78% of the company and you have no choice. It shouldn't have taken that. But it did. I opened the door. Sophie, Uncle Robert said quietly. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. You're right. We should have listened. I gave him a small smile. Thank you, Uncle Robert. See you at the board meeting. As I walked out of the conference room, I could hear the eruption of conversation behind me. Shock, anger, disbelief, and from a few voices, what might have been grudging respect. My phone buzzed. A text from my CFO at my software company. The Sterling manufacturing deal closed. $10 million transferred to escrow pending board approval. You really bought 78% of your family's company without them noticing. I texted back, I really did. You're terrifying. Thank you. I walked through the Sterling manufacturing lobby, past the portraits of my grandfather and the other founders, past the plaque celebrating 50 years of business, past the receptionist who'd watched me grow up at these shareholder meetings. Have a good day, Miss Sterling, she called out. You too, Diana, I said. Then I paused. Actually, Diana, you've been working here for what, 20 years? 23, she said with a smile. How would you feel about a promotion? I'm going to need an executive assistant, and you know this company better than anyone. Her eyes widened. Are you serious? Completely. 50% pay increase, full benefits, and you'd be working directly with me and Uncle Charles. Interested? Yes. Absolutely. Great. I'll have HR draw up the papers. You start next week. I smiled. Fair warning, things are about to change around here. I heard the shouting from the conference room, she admitted. The whole building heard it. Good, I said. Let them talk. As I drove away from Sterling Manufacturing, I pulled up my shareholder app one more time. The notification was still there. Majority holder requests emergency vote. I'd scheduled it to send the moment the previous vote on the TechCore partnership had been recorded. A little dramatic maybe, but effective. The vote wasn't about the TechCore partnership. It was about the new strategic direction, the new board appointments, and the new leadership structure. A vote where I controlled 78% of the shares. A vote that couldn't fail. My phone rang. Uncle Charles. Hello. I answered. I just saw the emergency vote notification, he said. His voice was calm now. Resigned maybe, but calm. You already had this planned. I did. You could have just told us. You could have avoided all this drama. I could have, I agreed. But then you would have fought me every step of the way. You would have questioned my authority, my experience, my right to make decisions. This way there's no question. I have the authority. The experience speaks for itself. And the right comes from owning 78% of the company. He was quiet for a moment. Your grandfather would have been proud of you. Would he? He always said you were the smartest of all of us. I didn't believe him. I thought he was just being sentimental because you spent so much time in his office as a kid, asking questions about the business. He paused. Turns out he was right. He usually was, I said. I'll see you at the board meeting next week, Uncle Charles said. And Sophie, thank you for not firing me. I know you could have. You're a good CEO, Uncle Charles. You just needed someone to push you out of your comfort zone. Consider me that someone. Loud and clear, he said and hung up. I drove back to my office, the headquarters of my little app company that somehow generated $8 million a year, and smiled. Cute that they thought 0.38% was all I had. Cute that they thought I was playing small. Cute that they thought big business was something I didn't understand. I'd spent 6 years quietly building an empire while they dismissed me as irrelevant. I'd purchased nearly 80% of their company while they were too busy being condescending to notice. And now finally they understood. I wasn't the cousin with barely any shares. I was the majority holder. And their emergency vote notification was just the beginning.